When an avoidant finally realizes you were the best thing they ever had, it doesn't hit them like thunder. It hits them like silence, the kind that forces them to face the truth they spent their whole life running from. The shock of emotional awakening in an avoidant begins quietly, almost invisibly, but the depth of it is powerful enough to shake the foundations of their emotional world. Avoidant individuals spend years building walls so high and so consistent that they truly believe nothing can penetrate them. They learn to move through relationships with a subtle emotional distance, not because they don't feel, but because feeling too deeply threatens their inner sense of control. When you were with them, your presence created a safe space they didn't understand. They benefited from your patience, your emotional steadiness, your consistency, but they rarely acknowledged it. In their mind, they believed they were protecting their independence, protecting themselves from being hurt, and preventing any emotional vulnerability from taking over. But the truth is, they were disconnected from their own emotional core, living behind a barrier that numbed what they were afraid to face. When you leave, or when the connection finally breaks, something begins to shift inside them that they cannot defend against. At first, they think it's just silence, a relief, or a return to the comfort of solitude. But that sense of comfort slowly turns into a strange, unsettling sensation because for the first time, there is no one buffering their inner emptiness. They become aware of a void they never had to confront while you were present. You weren't just a companion. You were the emotional bridge that allowed them to experience closeness without admitting they needed it. They didn't recognize this during the relationship, but once you're gone, the absence of that emotional grounding becomes impossible to ignore. This awakening is not dramatic on the outside, but internally, it is a collapse of the very structure they depended on. Suddenly, the mechanisms that once kept them safe feel isolating instead. They find themselves thinking about the small things you did, the emotional stability you offered, the conversations that quietly nurtured them. These memories don't come back in a soft or gentle way. They return like echoes in a room that has become too quiet. The avoidant begins to understand that the comfort they felt with you wasn't because they were independent. It was because you created emotional safety without demanding emotional exposure in return. Losing that kind of presence hits them in a place they've avoided looking into for years. Their mind tries to rationalize the loss at first. They replay old beliefs, telling themselves they are fine alone, that they don't need anyone, that relationships only complicate life. But these ideas start to feel hollow because they no longer match their internal experience. Instead of feeling strong and self-sufficient, they feel distracted, restless, and unusually sensitive to the absence of your energy. They don't understand it immediately, but this is the moment when their emotional defenses crack. The loss forces them to feel, and feeling forces them to acknowledge the truth they've denied. They cared more than they ever allowed themselves to admit. The shock deepens when they realize they never appreciated what they had while they had it. Avoidants often assume people will always be there, always return, always forgive the distance. But when you don't return, when your energy fades from their life, the awakening becomes even sharper. They start seeing their patterns for what they were, self-protection that cost them genuine connection. They recognize the missed opportunities for intimacy, the moments they shut down, the times you reached out, but they retreated. This awareness is painful because it's also the beginning of self-confrontation. The avoidant is finally forced to look at themselves not through fear or defensiveness, but through the clarity that only loss can bring. In this awakening, they begin to understand you weren't trying to control them or invade their privacy. You were offering love that they couldn't receive. They realize that the space they once cherished now feels cold. The freedom they protected now feels empty. The solitude they clung to now feels like punishment instead of peace. This is the emotional awakening they never saw coming. The realization of secure love begins slowly inside an avoidant, almost like a memory they didn't know they carried. Throughout the relationship, they convinced themselves that independence was the highest form of emotional safety. They believed closeness was a threat, vulnerability was a risk, and relying on someone else meant losing control. They confused detachment with strength, distance with freedom, and emotional self-isolation with maturity. While you were offering warmth, understanding, and consistency, they interpreted your emotional presence as pressure. Not because you were overwhelming, but because their inner world had taught them to fear connection long before they met you. They didn't realize that the calmness they felt around you was not a coincidence. It was the rare comfort of secure love, something their nervous system did not know how to recognize while it was being offered. It is only after you are gone that the shape of what you gave them becomes unmistakably clear. Without your emotional steadiness softening their world, they feel the full weight of their own defenses. The emotional distance they used to protect themselves now reveals itself as the very thing that cost them the relationship. They begin to understand that independence is not the absence of connection, but the ability to choose closeness without fear. When you were there, you offered understanding without suffocation, care without control, and patience without demands. These qualities were foreign to them. They didn't know how rare it was to have someone who didn't punish their silence, someone who didn't attack their retreat, someone who tried to understand the frightened child inside their adult body. Your secure love was something they had no internal framework to appreciate because they were still living in survival mode. When the relationship ends, they lose not just a partner, but an emotional anchor they didn't know they depended on. Avoidants often assume that connection feels heavy, that people drain them, that closeness restricts their freedom. But once you leave, they begin to feel something they spent their lives avoiding: the ache of true emotional loss. They realized that the peace they felt with you wasn't because they were better alone. It was because they were finally with someone who didn't trigger their defenses. You were the exception to their fear, the one person who offered love in a way that didn't awaken their panic. Losing that safety forces them to see the difference between genuine independence and emotional isolation. They begin to understand that what they once dismissed as too emotional, too close, or too intense was actually the exact kind of love they needed to feel whole. This realization is not gentle. It hits them in moments they don't expect. They think about how you listened when they shut down, how you didn't punish them for withdrawing, how you continued offering softness even when they responded with distance. They remember how your presence calmed their internal storms and how your emotional maturity brought balance to their chaos. These memories reveal something they never allowed themselves to admit during the relationship. They felt safer with you than with anyone they've ever known. Not because you demanded nothing, but because you accepted them without trying to change their core. That acceptance was the purest form of security, and they realize it only when it's no longer available. As time passes, they start comparing new interactions to the emotional grounding you provided. No one else feels as patient, as understanding, as steady. They see how easily others get frustrated with their distance. They see how quickly new partners take their withdrawal personally. They see how rare it was for someone to love them without trying to fix, chase, or pressure them. And that's when the truth becomes undeniable. You offered a secure love they weren't ready for, but now desperately miss. The safety they ran from becomes the very thing they long for. The love they once took for granted becomes the standard they search for everywhere but cannot find. The mirror of shadow work appears in an avoidant's life at the exact moment your absence forces them to confront their inner world without distraction. For most of their life, they have survived by separating themselves from their own emotions. They bury their fears under logic, bury their longing under independence, and bury their wounds under detachment. They convince themselves that shutting down is strength and staying distant keeps them safe. But the truth is that their distance is not protection. It is a shield built from old pain, usually formed long before adulthood. When you were present, your emotional availability acted like a light that reached places inside them they didn't want to explore. They felt something when they were with you, but instead of moving closer, they stepped back. Not because you were wrong for them, but because their unhealed self believed closeness meant danger. When you finally step away, something profound happens. There is no longer a person standing between them and their buried self. There is no one to absorb their emotional projections, no one to soothe their discomfort, and no one left to blame for the inner battles they've avoided facing. Instead, they are left alone with the parts of themselves they worked so hard to suppress. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything they tried not to see. They begin to notice patterns they never questioned before, like why they withdraw in moments of intimacy, why they hide their feelings even when they care deeply, or why they create emotional distance when they actually want connection. These realizations don't arrive gently. They hit with the force of clarity that cannot be undone. This is where the shadow begins to rise. The shadow is the collection of all the emotions, needs, fears, and memories an avoidant has rejected for years. When they lose you, the shadow finally has space to speak. It confronts them with truths they avoided acknowledging. It confronts them with the reality that they did feel deeply for you, even if they never expressed it. It confronts them with the fear that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but a path they were too afraid to walk. It confronts them with the painful recognition that they sabotaged the very connection they desired. These realizations are uncomfortable because they force the avoidant to recognize their role in the loss, not as a victim, but as the architect of their own emotional walls. As they sit with these truths, memories of the relationship begin resurfacing with new meaning. They remember moments where you reached out with softness, but they responded with coldness. They remember times you tried to communicate honestly while they chose silence. They remember your efforts to bring emotional closeness while they pushed you away out of habit, not lack of love. They begin to see the emotional generosity you offered and the emotional paralysis they lived in. This contrast stings because it reveals the emotional split inside them, the part of them that craved love and the part of them that feared it. The shadow work intensifies when they realize that their withdrawal wasn't a response to you, but a reaction to their own unresolved wounds. They recognize that the fear of being vulnerable was inherited from a past where vulnerability was unsafe. They see how their instinct to detach was a coping mechanism shaped by experiences where closeness brought disappointment or hurt. Losing you forces them to see that they didn't protect themselves from you. They protected themselves from the ghosts of their past. You are not the threat, but their inner world convinced them otherwise. This awakening does not heal them instantly. Instead, it begins a slow internal unraveling. It forces them to sit with feelings they never processed, longings they never admitted, and regrets they never imagined they would have. Your absence becomes the catalyst for self-reflection they avoided for years. The avoidant begins to understand that the person they pushed away was the exact person who could have met them with compassion, patience, and emotional truth. This recognition becomes the foundation of their transformation because for the first time, they are willing to look inward rather than hide behind distance. The pain of irreplaceability begins to unfold inside an avoidant long after the relationship is over, in a way they never anticipate. Avoidants often live with the belief that people are temporary, connections come and go, and emotional closeness is optional. They convince themselves that if a relationship ends, They will adapt easily because they were never fully attached in the first place. This belief becomes a kind of emotional armor, protecting them from the fear that someone could matter deeply. When they lose you, they expect that the absence will feel like freedom. They expect their solitude to feel like relief. They expect life to return to its usual emotional distance. But instead, something unexpected happens. They begin to notice that the space you once filled is not being filled by silence. It is being filled by longing. This longing doesn't appear all at once. At first, it shows up subtly. They compare new conversations to your conversations without meaning to. They notice how quickly others misunderstand their withdrawal, how easily new people get frustrated, and how none of them have the patience you had. They realize that the way you listened was different. The way you cared was different. The way you understood their unspoken needs was something they assumed anyone could do. But now they see how rare it truly was. People like you don't come around often, and this truth begins to crack their old belief that everyone is replaceable. Avoidants often test relationships without realizing they are doing it. They pull away, expecting you to chase. They grow quiet, expecting you to understand. They shut down, expecting you to wait. But when you stop doing these things, when you choose yourself and create distance, their entire emotional system becomes destabilized. They didn't think your absence would hurt because they believed they held the emotional power. They believed distance made them untouchable. But now the withdrawal they used to control the relationship becomes the very thing that exposes how deeply they depended on your presence. The realization of irreplaceability hits them hardest in ordinary moments. They see something that reminds them of you and feel a heaviness they can't explain. They remember your sense of calm, your emotional warmth, your steady presence, and suddenly the world feels colder than it used to. They start noticing how effortlessly you made connection feel safe, how you didn't pressure them to open up, how you created emotional space for them to breathe. These memories show up uninvited and linger longer than they want. They begin to understand that what they lost wasn't just a partner, but a person who truly saw them. As they interact with new people, the differences become more painful. Others may expect emotional availability they cannot give. Others may misinterpret their silence as indifference. Others may take their distance personally, but you didn't. You were patient in a way that did not shame them. You were present in a way that did not overwhelm them. This contrast grows more undeniable with time, and the avoidant realizes that the connection they once treated casually was actually one of the most meaningful experiences of their life. This pain deepens when they imagine trying to recreate what you gave them. Emotional safety like yours cannot be manufactured. Your ability to remain compassionate even when hurt, your ability to love with depth, your ability to understand their fears without judging them. These qualities form an emotional blueprint that becomes impossible for them to forget. They start to see that while they kept you at arm's length, you were offering them a kind of emotional intimacy they may never find again. As this awareness grows, regret settles in. The avoidant realizes that while they were guarding their heart, they were also blocking love from entering. They recognized that they didn't lose you because you lacked value. They lost you because they couldn't receive what you were offering. And now, as they face the emotional emptiness left behind, they begin to understand the true weight of irreplaceability. They see clearly that you were not just another person in their story. You were the moment in their life that revealed what real connection feels like, and they realized too late that nothing compares to the love they pushed away. The collapse of the ego narrative inside an avoidant is one of the most powerful and disorienting experiences they go through after losing someone who genuinely cared for them. For a long time, their inner world is built on a set of beliefs designed to protect them from emotional vulnerability. These beliefs act like invisible walls that shape how they view themselves, others, and relationships. They tell themselves that they don't need anyone, that they are better off alone, that closeness is a burden, and that relying on others only leads to disappointment. These ideas feel like truth because they were formed in moments of emotional pain, usually early in life. Over time, the avoidant turns these beliefs into a personal philosophy, a story that helps them avoid confronting the deeper fears and longings they've learned to suppress. When they were with you, this narrative was still in place, but your emotional availability created cracks they ignored. Once you are gone, the narrative they've relied on begins to lose its power. At first, they try to reinforce it. They repeat old lines in their mind. "This is better. I don't need this relationship. I'm fine alone." But these affirmations no longer bring comfort because their emotional reality no longer matches their internal script. Instead of feeling free, they feel restless. Instead of feeling strong, they feel unsettled. Instead of feeling relieved, they feel the presence of something they can no longer deny: loss. This contradiction creates an inner tension they cannot escape. The story they told themselves doesn't fit anymore, and the collapse begins. The collapse happens slowly and in layers. The first layer is confusion. They don't understand why they keep thinking about you if they never needed anyone. They don't understand why their solitude feels heavier than it used to. They don't understand why memories of you keep slipping into their thoughts, uninvited. The next layer is discomfort. They start questioning whether their emotional distance truly protected them or whether it caused the very pain they now feel. The final layer is confrontation. They begin to see that their old beliefs were not truths, but coping mechanisms. And your absence is what exposes this reality. Your presence in their life challenged the story they lived in without them realizing it. You represented connection, safety, emotional maturity, and genuine affection. These things should have felt like threats based on their narrative, yet they didn't. You didn't suffocate them. You didn't demand more than they could give. You didn't punish them for withdrawing. Instead, you created an environment where closeness didn't feel dangerous. But because they were still trapped inside their ego story, they interpreted your love through the lens of fear, assuming it was better to pull away than to risk vulnerability. When the relationship ends, they start replaying the moments they dismissed or minimized, and suddenly the meaning of those moments changes. Your kindness looks different in hindsight. Your patience looks rare. Your emotional presence looks intentional. And they realize that they weren't protecting themselves from you. They were protecting themselves from their own unhealed past. The collapse deepens when they understand that their ego narrative kept them from experiencing real intimacy. They see how their fear of vulnerability made them misinterpret your affection. They see how their need for control prevented them from receiving love fully. They see how the walls they built to stay safe ended up keeping out the person who would never have hurt them. And this awareness is painful because it forces them to recognize that they weren't victims of intimacy. They were victims of their own defenses. This isn't just regret, it's awakening. They begin to see how their old beliefs shaped their behavior, limited their capacity for connection, and ultimately pushed away someone who genuinely valued them. As the narrative collapses, a new truth emerges. They realize they do need connection. They realize closeness isn't weakness. They realize their independence was actually emotional avoidance. Most painfully, they realize that the love you offered was the kind of love they always craved but never felt worthy of. And now that it's gone, they finally face the truth their ego protected them from. Losing you wasn't freedom. It was the moment that stripped away every illusion they lived behind, revealing the depth of their own unmet longing. The long road of regret and reflection for an avoidant begins only after the noise of the breakup fades and the stillness settles in. Avoidants do not feel regret immediately because their emotional defenses are strong, automatic, and deeply ingrained. At first, they feel a strange mix of relief and detachment, telling themselves the same story they've used for years: that distance is safer, that solitude is simpler, that relationships bring complications they're better off avoiding. Their mind tries to maintain control by keeping emotions at bay. But regret for an avoidant is not an instant reaction. It is a slow and steady unraveling that grows stronger as time passes, revealing feelings they spent years avoiding. In the early stages, they act as if nothing has changed, but the truth is that they begin to notice shifts they can't explain. Something feels off, but they don't trace it back to you at first. They feel restless, distracted, oddly unsettled even in moments that usually bring them comfort. They try to drown this feeling with routines, distractions, or logic, but the emotional discomfort lingers. What begins as a subtle ache gradually expands, and they start replaying memories they never paid attention to before. They revisit conversations, moments where you showed patience, times when you offered emotional safety, little gestures that meant nothing to them back then, but suddenly carry weight. These memories begin to surface at unexpected times, and each one adds a layer to the regret that is slowly forming. As the days turn into weeks, the avoidant starts comparing new interactions to the connection they had with you. They realize how quickly others get frustrated by their distance, how easily misunderstandings arise, and how rare it was to have someone who understood their emotional language without forcing them to change. They start seeing that the emotional stability you offered was not just comforting, it was transformative. But avoidance makes them recognize this truth only in absence, never in presence. And this is where the regret begins to deepen, because they realize they cannot find that same emotional safety anywhere else. The most painful part of this journey is the moment they understand that you were not trying to threaten their autonomy or invade their space. Instead, you were offering a kind of love that honored their wounds even when they couldn't acknowledge them. They see now that the relationship didn't fail because you asked for too much. It failed because they gave too little. This realization breaks the narrative they've lived with for years, forcing them to confront the truth they avoided. They weren't emotionally incapable, they were emotionally afraid, and losing you becomes the mirror that shows them exactly what those fears cost. With time, regret turns into reflection. They begin to examine their own patterns, their emotional triggers, the instinctive withdrawal they relied on, and the protective walls they never questioned. They start seeing how their fear of vulnerability made them misinterpret your intentions, how their need for control prevented them from experiencing intimacy, and how their silence hurt the person who cared the most. This reflection does not come with dramatic tears or sudden epiphanies. It shows up quietly, consistently, like a soft voice reminding them of what they lost. The avoidant eventually realizes that the connection you offered was rare, the emotional acceptance you gave was extraordinary, and the space you created for them was something they may never find again. This understanding stretches across months, sometimes years, shaping every future relationship they attempt to build. They begin to feel the depth of what they threw away, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't understand their own emotions until it was too late. The long road of regret and reflection becomes the place where they finally recognize your true value. It is the slow awakening to a truth that their defenses could no longer protect them from. You were the best thing that ever happened to them, but their fear of closeness made them realize it only when the door had already closed behind you. The journey of an avoidant is not about winning or losing a relationship. It is about awakening to themselves. They do not break open quickly. They do not understand their emotions in real time. They only learn through distance, through absence, through the echo of what once felt safe but was never fully embraced. Your presence gave them a glimpse of what secure love feels like, but they were not ready to accept it. Only when you stepped away did they see the truth buried beneath their defenses. They were not protecting themselves from you. They were protecting themselves from the parts of their past they never healed. And because of this, they could not recognize that the connection they were holding at arm's length was the very connection they were internally starving for.